I'm Marissa Nolan, 31, the youngest daughter, the black sheep, and until recently the only one in the family who knew how the baby really died. The funeral was held in the church where I was baptized, though no one had spoken my name aloud that morning. It was my nephew's funeral, Micah, just shy of 6 months. I'd worn a plain black dress, long sleeves, a modest cut. My hands trembled slightly, more from the weight of what I knew than the July heat. Every pew was packed friends, family, co-workers of my sister Emily, but no one left room for me. The service had started late, as always, with murmurs of Emily's just finishing up the photos and she's not ready yet. And when she did arrive, dramatic, red-eyed, holding a tiny white urn like a newborn, the entire room tilted toward her. My mother walked beside her, hand pressed to her back. My father followed with his head low. I stood instinctively. I thought maybe she'd look at me, that her steps would slow and she'd come to the seat I'd saved near the aisle. But Emily didn't stop. She walked right past me, and my mother turned her head, placed a firm hand on my shoulder, and whispered through clenched teeth, "Please don't make a scene today, Marissa." So I sat back down, like a child punished in front of a classroom. The priest's voice started to echo, reading Psalm 23 like he didn't believe it. The sanctuary was sweltering, no fans, no breeze. I focused on the way the stained glass made everyone's skin look like colored wax. A cousin leaned forward in the pew ahead of me and whispered, "I didn't think Marissa would show her face." Another answered, "She always does when it's not about her." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. There was no slideshow, no story about Micah's short life, only Emily, breaking into sobs whenever the attention strayed. My father clutched the side of the pew so tightly his knuckles turned blue, and still they said nothing of how Micah had died. Then it came after the third hymn, and a forced laugh from Emily about Micah's smile like the sun, a moment meant to feel intimate. The priest nodded to the front row. "Anyone in the family who wishes to share a word may come forward." A rustling. My aunt spoke first. "A tale of God's little angel." Then my brother-in-law mumbled through a few broken syllables about holding Micah during one quiet nap. And then, as I stood slowly, carefully, my heels not even making a sound, my father leaned across the aisle and blocked my path with his hand. "No," he said softly. "Not today. Marissa, please." I paused, still facing forward. "Why not?" I asked. My voice was even, but thin, as if I had to borrow air to form the word. "Because this isn't about you," my mother hissed from the other end of the pew. "Don't turn this into another performance." I wasn't performing. I was mourning. I sat back down, quieter than I stood. My hands rested on my lap, cold with sweat. The final prayer began, and as everyone bowed their heads, I slipped my hand into the inside pocket of my coat and brushed against the folded paper the death certificate. Micah's. I'd requested a copy as soon as I heard the whispers from the nurse at County General. There was bruising, old and new. Someone should look closer. If you've ever been through something like this, being called too emotional just for asking questions, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family silence ever made you feel invisible too. The final hymn played, an overly cheerful rendition of Morning Has Broken. Everyone stood, filing slowly toward the reception room. I stayed in the pew, watching the glimmer of light bounce off the urn's lid. Emily clutched it like a possession, like a prize. Her mascara had run, but her steps were poised. That's when a voice cut across the chapel from near the doors, firm. "Official." "Miss Nolan?" the woman asked. She was dressed in a navy blazer with a hospital badge clipped to her chest. Heads turned. Even the priest looked confused. Miss Marissa Nolan. I stood. My legs were weak but sure. Yes, we've confirmed the findings, the woman said, holding a sealed folder. Your report was valid. Micah's file is being reclassified. A ripple moved through the room, stiffened shoulders, halted breath. Emily froze in place. My mother's lips parted, soundless. What are you talking about? My father said, voice rising for the first time that day. The woman held up the folder but didn't open it. There's a discrepancy on the original certificate that was never disclosed to next of kin. Miss Nolan requested a medical inquiry. The child's injuries weren't consistent with the narrative provided. You could hear the air leave the room. I reached into my coat and unfolded the original certificate. They said it was SIDS. I said quietly. But there's a fracture. Old. And another. Micah didn't just stop breathing. Gasps. Murmurs. A hand went to a mouth. Emily swayed and dropped the urn to the floor. The lid clattered and spun. And in that stunned silence, finally, everyone turned to look at me. The sound of the urn hitting the floor felt like a scream in a cathedral. A perfect silence followed the kind that only happens when no one knows who they're supposed to believe. The urn didn't crack, but the tension in the room did. Emily didn't move to pick it up. Her hands just hovered in the air like she was still holding it, even though it had rolled to the priest's feet. I didn't move either. I just stood there with the death certificate shaking in my hand. My voice wanted to leave me, but the facts anchored me in place. The medical examiner's signature at the bottom. The diagnosis: cranial fracture. Healed rib. No signs of resuscitation. Estimated time of trauma: 48 to 72 hours prior. Where did you get that? My father asked. He wasn't yelling. Not yet. But his voice had that edge to it, controlled rage. Shame boiling just beneath. I requested it from the hospital, I said, folding it back neatly and sliding it into my bag. I had to lie and say I was next of kin, but I figured someone in this family should care what actually happened to him. Emily's face contorted. It wasn't grief. Now, it was fury. You had no right. You always do this. You dig around like some wannabe detective. He died. He stopped breathing in his crib. That's what happened. No. I replied, stepping closer. That's what you said happened. My mother moved between us like a stagehand changing the scene, all whispered hisses and wide eyes. That's enough. Marissa. We will not disgrace his memory like this. We are not doing this in front of everyone. I looked around. What memory? The one where everyone pretends. The one where a baby dies, and no one even asks why people started to scatter. Chairs pushed back. A couple of older cousins made awkward eye contact and then beeline toward the door, clutching purses and programs. But a few people stayed seated, watching, processing. The woman from the hospital stepped to my side. Her badge read, L. Cruz, Family Liaison Officer. There will be an official report filed, Cruz said calmly. It's in the hospital's hands now, and the police will likely reach out. I can't say more than that at the moment. But Miss Nolan was correct to raise the concern. Concern, my father repeated. She's a meddler. She doesn't know how to let things go. No, Cruz said. She knows how to listen. That silenced him. I don't think anyone had ever said that about me in this family. All my life. I was told I overthought things, that I took things personally. When I was 10, I cried during a Thanksgiving toast because my name wasn't mentioned with the others. When I was 16, I stayed up all night after hearing my parents tell a neighbor I was the difficult one. When I was 24, I moved out in silence, and now here I was, still sensitive, still difficult, but also, apparently, the only one willing to speak the truth. The priest stepped forward, clearing his throat. Perhaps we should conclude this gathering in peace, whatever concerns exist. Perhaps another time. No, I said. No more other times. That baby deserved more than silence. Emily finally broke from her trance. So what now? Marissa. You want me arrested, is that it? You want to see me in handcuffs at my own child's funeral? I want to know what happened, I said. I want to know who was watching him. I want to know why the nurse said this wasn't the first time he came in with bruises. I didn't expect her to admit it. Not then. Not in front of everyone. But something changed in her eyes. Not guilt, not fear, relief. I wasn't the one watching him, Emily whispered. It wasn't me. My stomach dropped. Then who? She turned to our mother. Everything froze. Mom was helping me, she said, voice trembling now. That week. She offered to take the night shifts so I could rest. You remember, don't you? Mom. My mother's mouth didn't move. Her hands stayed tightly clasped. Her eyes, however, blinked too fast. She said I looked tired, said it was postpartum. She wanted to help. I did help, my mother said slowly, as if each word was made of glass. I did everything I could. She was holding him that night, Emily said, now looking back at me. And when I woke up, he was already cold. Cruz quietly pulled out a small notepad. The priest backed away. Someone in the crowd sobbed. Another person left the room entirely. You didn't tell anyone, I said. She told me it would ruin everything, Emily said. That no one would understand. That it was an accident. She begged me to say it was Sid's. You agreed. My voice cracked. I wasn't thinking straight, Emily replied. I was grieving. No, I whispered. You were hiding. It felt like someone poured ice water down my spine. Not because it was unbelievable, but because it was so easy to believe. Because I knew how controlling our mother could be. How she'd taken over Emily's wedding, changed the guest list, rewrote her vows. How she used to tell me I was too rough when I held baby dolls wrong. How she never let anyone else be in charge of anything fragile. The chapel now felt like a courtroom, a crucifix overhead, pews like jury benches. My mother, the matriarch, finally said, it was a mistake, a single mistake. Was it? I asked. My voice didn't rise. I didn't cry. I just stood still as the waves broke around me. Emily fell to her knees beside the urn, finally picking it up. If you want to blame someone, she said, just blame me. Everyone else already does. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to answer. All I knew was that a baby died. And it wasn't sudden. And it wasn't silent. It just went unseen. Cruz turned to me and nodded slightly. The investigators will need full statements. You've done your part today. I nodded. As I walked toward the doors, someone gently touched my arm. I turned to Aunt Lorraine, wrinkled, usually indifferent, but now her eyes were wet. You were right to ask, she said softly. We all saw things we ignored. I think we were just scared of what they meant. I gave a small, sad smile. Me too. Outside, the sun had started to fall, casting long shadows across the grass. Cars were parked haphazardly. A child chased a butterfly across the cemetery lawn, unaware of everything. I stood beneath the sycamore tree at the edge of the parking lot and exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. The truth didn't fix anything, but at least now it had been spoken. I didn't go to the reception. They held it in the church basement, beneath the same sanctuary where Micah's urn had nearly shattered. Deviled eggs, fruit salad, cheap lemonade in plastic pitchers. I'd been to enough of these gatherings in my life to know exactly what it would feel like: lukewarm condolences, awkward glances, and someone eventually saying, she didn't mean any harm. Instead, I sat in my car for a while, staring at the steering wheel like it held answers. The folder from the hospital lay on the passenger seat. I hadn't even opened the rest of it. Just the one page had been enough, the page they tried to keep quiet. But curiosity has its own pulse. And after the engine cooled, I finally reached for the folder again. There were photographs, not graphic, just clinical. A small foot, a purplish mark along the side, a timestamp. A nurse's handwritten note. Bruise appears older than reported. Consider further inquiry. There was also a copy of the incident report from Micah's last emergency room visit, 3 weeks before he died. Emily had brought him in alone, said he rolled off the couch. The attending doctor made note of inconsistent explanation, mild abdominal bruising. No child welfare report had been filed. I put the folder back and stared through the windshield at nothing for a long time. My reflection in the glass looked thinner than I remembered, like the act of carrying the truth had made me lose something too. Eventually, I drove. Nowhere specific. Just out of the church lot. Away from the peeling paint and the memories. My phone buzzed once. Then again. I ignored it. It wasn't until I pulled into the parking lot outside my apartment that I looked. 15 missed calls. Emily. 6. Mom. 4. Dad. 3. Unknown. Number 2. I turned the screen face down. When I was a child, I believed that if you spoke the truth out loud, it would fix something. That exposing the wound would mean someone would come along and patch it. But now I was older. I understood better. Truth doesn't heal by itself. It just stops the infection from spreading. Inside my apartment, it was quiet. I kept everything minimal on purpose. No clutter, no noise, just a few plants, a stack of unread books, and a teapot I hadn't used in months. I turned on the kettle, more out of ritual than thirst. I was halfway through pouring when the buzzer rang. I froze. No one ever came unannounced. It rang again. I approached the intercom. "Yes, it's me," Emily said. Her voice was small, strained. "Please let me up." I hesitated. Then, without a word, I pressed the buzzer. She didn't knock when she reached my door. Just stood there, arms at her sides, wearing the same black dress from the funeral. Her mascara had been wiped away, but a faint streak remained like a scar. She looked younger than I'd ever seen her, like the big sister I once followed through grocery aisles and backyards. I stepped aside. She entered without speaking, took a seat on my sofa, hands folded in her lap. "You didn't answer my calls," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "I didn't." A beat of silence passed. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. "I swear to you, Marissa, I didn't know it would go this far. You didn't mean for your baby to die." My voice came out sharper than I expected. She flinched. "That's not what I said." I sat down across from her. The kettle whistled faintly in the background. Ignored. "I know what Mom's like," I said. "I know how she gets into your head. But you let her convince you to lie to everyone. You let her tell the police it was just sudden. You lied on the record." "She told me no one would believe me if I said she dropped him," Emily whispered. "She said they'd think I was just trying to blame someone else. That if I told the truth, they'd take away everything. So you lied for her." I was sleep-deprived. Scared. I didn't know what to do. "You let me be called a monster," I said. "You stood there while they said I was too emotional. You let them treat me like a threat to the family." Emily stared at her knees. "I didn't ask them to say that." "No. But you didn't stop them either." She wiped her face with her sleeve. "I've lost everything. Marissa. He was my son." "I know," I said, more softly now. "But Micah wasn't just your son. He was a person. A baby. And you let Mom rewrite his ending." Emily looked up at me. Her eyes were bloodshot but clear. "What do I do now?" she asked. I didn't know how to answer that. There's no handbook for when the family script collapses. No guide for when you finally admit the truth and nothing gets better. I sat beside her on the couch. We didn't touch. We didn't speak. just shared the silence like an inheritance neither of us wanted. After a while, Emily said, "They're going to investigate her, aren't they? They already are?" She nodded. "Dad says they'll blame me no matter what." "Maybe," I said, "but they won't be able to pretend anymore." She breathed out slowly. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "I'm not sure what I feel yet." That seemed to hurt her more than if I'd said yes. We sat there for over an hour, not as sisters, not as enemies, just as two women carrying the weight of the same tiny ghost. When she left, she didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. After the door shut behind her, I finally poured the tea, sat with it in my hands. It was cold by the time I drank it. Bitter, but calming. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching headlights pass through the window, casting long shadows across the room. I thought about Micah, how small he must have been, how quiet, how afraid. And I thought about my mother, how she never admitted when she was wrong, how she turned every crisis into a question of loyalty, how she'd probably start calling other family members tomorrow, spinning a new story, one where I was hysterical, where Emily cracked, where everything was still manageable, but I didn't care anymore. I had the certificate, the evidence. The silence was broken, and there was no going back. The next morning, I walked down to the courthouse. I didn't need to file anything. Cruz had assured me the authorities were already in motion, but I wanted to be present. I wanted to know, physically, that this wasn't just a nightmare I'd journal about in 10 years. At the entrance, a security guard checked my bag. He looked at the folder, then at me. "You here for something official?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Something overdue." He nodded once and waved me through. I stepped into the echoing corridor, past the bulletin boards and vending machines, past the chatter of lawyers and court clerks. I walked straight toward the Family Services office, not to fix what happened, but to make sure no one buried it again. The Family Services office didn't look like a place where lives unraveled. It looked like a DMV that forgot to smile. Gray walls, beige chairs, laminated posters peeling at the corners. A quiet printer hummed in the corner. A receptionist chewed gum behind the glass, eyes glazed over from too many forms and not enough daylight. I gave my name. She blinked twice, then passed me a clipboard. "Have a seat. Someone will call you shortly." I filled out the form with a pen tied to a string. The box labeled "Relation to Child" made my hand hover for a second too long. I wrote "Aunt." Below that, in the notes section, I added I submitted the original request for reclassification. I have the documents. Time passed slowly, the kind that isn't tracked by minutes but by how many times someone shifts in their seat. A woman 2 chairs down from me rocked gently while her toddler kicked at a plastic truck. A man behind me scrolled on his phone with the volume too high. Somewhere down the hall, a baby wailed like a violin string snapping. Eventually, a woman in a navy skirt suit stepped out and called my name, Marissa Nolan. I stood. She smiled gently, too gently, like someone trained to diffuse explosives. "I'm Deputy Jensen. Thanks for coming in." She led me to a small office with no windows and offered me a bottle of water. I declined. "I know this isn't easy," she said, "but your report helped us open the file early. We've spoken with both Emily and your mother already." "How did that go?" I asked, trying not to sound bitter. Jensen opened a folder. "Your mother is uncooperative. She denies ever being alone with the child, but Emily's statement contradicts hers, and the timeline supports Emily's version." I nodded. "We're also reviewing prior hospital visits," she continued. "Micah was seen 3 times in his short life. 2 of those visits had red flags. No one filed reports. The pediatrician has since resigned. Why didn't anyone do anything earlier, I asked. Because most people don't want to believe harm could come from within a family, she said. And because people like your mother know how to present themselves. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She placed a document in front of me. Would you be willing to provide a full written account of your interactions with both women in the days before Micah's death? Anything unusual you remember? Details matter. I nodded and took the pen. I wrote for nearly 45 minutes. Every word felt like cutting something open that never healed right. I wrote about the phone call Emily made the night Micah died, how her voice was calm but her words made no sense. I wrote about how my mother refused to let me come over to help. How she said, "You'll just make things worse." I wrote about the silence at the hospital, how no one would meet my eyes. When I finished, Jensen took the paper carefully. "We'll be contacting additional family members," she said. "There will likely be home visits, psychological evaluations. If the DA sees sufficient evidence, there may be charges." I exhaled. "Against Emily?" "Possibly," she said, "but more likely against your mother. She was the last adult with the child, per Emily's testimony." I looked down at my hands. "My family won't forgive me for this." Jensen paused. "Forgiveness and silence aren't the same thing." I nodded again. When I left the office, the sky had turned overcast. Clouds heavy. Low. The kind of gray that makes the world feel like it's waiting for something to break. I walked to a bench outside the building and sat without thinking. Just watching people go by, lawyers in stiff suits, parents dragging kids, interns with clipboards. And then I saw him, my father. He was standing by the curb, leaning against his truck. I hadn't seen him arrive, hadn't expected to. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, but his posture hadn't changed, a man built out of rigid expectations and heavy disappointments. He caught my eye and nodded once. I didn't move. Eventually, he walked over. "Your mother's not talking to anyone," he said, not looking at me. "Doesn't surprise me. She's convinced this is all some vendetta. Says you've been jealous since you were a teenager." I didn't respond. "She's wrong," he added after a beat. "About that?" I looked at him then. "But you believed her?" "You always did." He sighed. "When a storm hits your house, you brace the windows you like best. I never said it was fair. You let her shame me." I said. "Every time I cried, every time I questioned something, you let her make it sound like I was broken." He lowered himself onto the bench beside me, slowly, as if the truth weighed more than his own bones. "I didn't know how to fight her," he said. "She was always louder, smarter. I thought if I kept the peace, the rest would settle on its own. It didn't." "No," he admitted. "It didn't." We sat in silence. Then he said, almost like a confession, "I saw the bruise once. On Micah's shoulder. Thought it looked odd. She told me it was a birthmark. And you didn't press. I didn't want to start something," he said. I looked at him. Something had already started. You just didn't want to see it. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. It wasn't enough, but it was more than I'd ever gotten. When I stood to leave, he didn't follow, just stayed on the bench, staring at the courthouse doors like they held a secret he'd never understand. That night, I went back to my apartment and did something I hadn't done in months. I opened Micah's photo album on my phone. I'd taken more pictures than I remembered. His smile crooked and gummy, his eyes round with wonder. In one photo, he's grabbing my thumb with both hands. I stared at it for a long time. Then I printed it. I put it in a small frame and placed it on the windowsill. Not as a shrine, not as a symbol, just as a reminder that he existed, that he mattered. that someone had seen him clearly, even if only for a moment. The next morning, I received a message from Cruz. Update: investigation is ongoing. Emily is cooperating. Your statement was instrumental. Thank you. I didn't reply. I just read it 3 times, then put my phone down and let the silence hold me. For once, it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. 3 days later, the front porch of my parents' house turned into a press scene. A neighbor tipped them off. Someone from the county's protective services showed up with a clipboard and a quiet knock. No handcuffs, no sirens, just paperwork and procedure. Still, by the time the second official left, a news van had parked 2 houses down, then another. A cameraman filmed the driveway like something might rise from the pavement. I didn't watch it live. I saw it later online, like everyone else. A blurry shot of my mother opening the door, lips thin, eyes sharp. My father stood behind her, arms folded tight across his chest. They looked exactly how they always had when cornered: proud, defensive, above it all. The news anchors didn't name me, but they quoted part of my report. Concerns raised by a family member led to the reopening of the child's file. The case has been reclassified as suspicious. The footage cut to a close-up of a teddy bear tucked inside a memorial on the porch. I didn't know who put it there. That evening, I got a voicemail from my cousin Ivy. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Marissa. Her voice trembled. I just wanted to say, I believe you. I should have said something sooner. I remember Micah had a bruise on his cheek at Christmas. Emily said it was a rash. I didn't question it. I'm so sorry. I replayed the message twice, then a third time. It was the first apology I didn't have to ask for. The next day, I walked into work like I had any other Thursday. The office looked the same, cubicles humming, printers jamming, phones ringing. I worked in compliance at a nonprofit, a quiet, meticulous job I'd chosen for its predictability. Numbers didn't lie. They didn't twist your words or look away when things got uncomfortable. Still, I felt exposed, like everyone could see through my skin. It took until lunch for someone to say something. Hey, James from accounting said, hovering awkwardly near my desk. I saw the story. I didn't know that was your family. I gave him a small nod. Yeah, it was. He scratched his neck. I just wanted to say, it's brave, what you did. Thanks, I said. I didn't really feel brave. Well, you were, after he left? I stared at my screen for a long time and didn't type anything. Just sat in the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and paperwork. Later that week, Emily called. I didn't pick up. She texted instead. They're investigating Mom's medical license. She's suspended from all elder care cases until further notice. I didn't know she still volunteered at the assisted living home. Did you? Micah's things are still in the apartment? I can't look at them. I don't know what to do. I stared at the blinking cursor for 5 full minutes before I typed back. You don't have to look at them yet. Just don't throw them away. Not out of shame. She replied with a single word. Okay. A day later, she sent a photo: Micah's baby blanket, folded in a box with his name embroidered at the corner. Blue thread. Faint milk stain. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But I didn't. I just saved the photo in a private folder and closed my phone. That Sunday, I visited his grave. They'd placed the urn in a small plot beside a weeping cherry tree. The marker was temporary, just a plaque with his name, dates, and a quote I didn't recognize. He was loved more than he knew. I didn't know who picked it. I didn't ask. I brought no flowers, just the photograph I'd printed, tucked in a clear plastic frame. I knelt and placed it near the base of the stone. I'm sorry, I whispered. You deserved more. The cemetery was empty. The wind barely moved the leaves. And still, it felt like someone was listening. When I stood, I noticed someone watching me from the path, an older woman, long gray coat, holding a single carnation. "Are you his mother?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "No, I'm his aunt." She nodded, stepped forward. "My grandson's buried 2 rows over. Died last year. Different cause. But the loss feels the same." I didn't know what to say, but I didn't need to. She simply rested a hand on my shoulder for a moment and moved on. Afterward, I drove to the edge of town, to the lake where my parents used to take us as kids before everything got complicated. Before the roles were set in stone, Emily the favorite, me the fixer, Mom the queen, Dad the shadow. The water was calm. Light rippled across the surface in slow, silver threads. I sat on a picnic bench and let the breeze move through my hair. No earbuds, no distractions. Just breath and wind and memory. I remembered one summer afternoon, Emily and I on the dock, bare feet swinging. Micah wasn't born yet. We were still just sisters then, not symbols in some fractured story. She told me, "You always notice the cracks in things." I'd frowned. "You make that sound like a bad thing." She had smiled. "No, it's just exhausting." Now, I finally understood what she meant. To carry the cracks means you're always watching, always waiting. You never get to look away. That evening, back home, I opened my laptop and started writing a letter. Not to anyone in particular. Not even for Emily. Just for the future. Maybe. For myself. I wrote, "Micah, you didn't get a chance to speak. So I did. You didn't get justice yet. But you got truth. And I promise whatever comes next, your story won't be erased." I printed the letter, folded it into an envelope, and slid it between the pages of a book I kept by my bed. I didn't plan to send it anywhere. It just felt right to write it. A week later, Emily called again. This time, I answered. Her voice was soft. "They're moving forward with formal charges. Against Mom." I exhaled. I figured. She says she's being betrayed. I waited. She says I've let you poison me. I laughed once, bitterly. She still thinks I'm the disease. "No," Emily said. "She thinks you're the cure. That's why she's so scared." I didn't know what to say. For once, Emily didn't fill the silence. She just let it hang between us, like something sacred. Then she said, "Do you want to come by this weekend? We could go through Micah's box together." I paused. "Okay. Okay," she echoed. We didn't make it sound like a big thing, because it wasn't. Not yet. It was just the next small moment in a long, hard road, but it was something. And for once, that felt like enough. Emily opened the door barefoot, her hair pulled into a loose bun like it had been hastily tied back and forgotten. She looked different. Not better. Not worse. Just real. No makeup. No performance. No mask. Her eyes were tired, but they met mine without flinching. "Hey," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." I hadn't been to her apartment since the baby shower. That day, it had been full of tissue paper and pastel balloons, our mother orchestrating every moment like it was a royal coronation. Now, it felt hollow, quiet. A faint smell of lavender hung in the air, something artificial, like she'd sprayed it before I arrived. The baby swing still sat by the window, unplugged, dust collecting in the seat. The box was already on the coffee table. Cardboard, plain, but taped shut with care. Emily stood over it like she was about to open something radioactive. "I haven't touched anything inside," she said. I couldn't. I nodded and sat down beside her. She didn't sit right away, just stared at the box like it might judge her for being too late. Finally, She exhaled and pulled back the tape. The first item was a pair of socks, soft, blue, with tiny clouds knitted into the heels. She held them gently between her fingers, then placed them in my lap without a word. Next came a pacifier still in its packaging, then a rattle shaped like a lion, the paint slightly chipped from being chewed. There was a onesie folded neatly at the bottom, white with tiny yellow stars. I remembered buying it. I hadn't gone to the store with our mother or joined the registry drama. I just picked something simple and mailed it, with no note. "You got him this," Emily said. "Yeah," I replied. "He wore it the night he—" She stopped. That night. Her hands were trembling now. She cradled the onesie like it was more fragile than memory itself. "I used to smell his hair after he fell asleep," she whispered, "just to make sure he was real. I'd sit on the floor next to his crib, even when he didn't wake up. I stayed there. I didn't want to miss anything. I didn't respond. There was no right thing to say. Sometimes, presence is enough." Then she reached deeper into the box and pulled out a notebook. Small, leather-bound. She opened it and held it between us. I started writing him letters. She said, "After you told me the truth, after everything, I didn't know where else to put it." She flipped to the first page. Her handwriting was careful, hesitant. "Micah, I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you. I thought I was keeping things together. But all I did was stay quiet. I didn't know how much damage silence could do. I see you now. I hear you now. I promise you won't be erased." She didn't read the rest aloud. Just closed the notebook and placed it back in the box. We sat there for a while, her knees pulled up under her, my hands folded tightly in my lap. The silence wasn't uncomfortable this time. It felt earned, like a room that had finally breathed out after holding tension too long. "I don't think I should keep the box," she said suddenly. I looked at her. "Why I don't want it to become a punishment," she said. "Every time I look at it, I feel like it's asking me why I failed. But when I think about him, I want to remember the nights I sang to him, the times he reached for me, not just the ending." "What will you do with it?" I asked. "I thought maybe we could bury it." "Bury it? Not like a funeral," she said quickly. "More like a ritual. Just you and me, just to mark that it happened, that we aren't pretending anymore." I hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." She looked up, surprised. "Really? Yeah. Let's do it." We packed everything back into the box, each item folded carefully, like laying something to rest. I carried it to my car, and she followed me with a small shovel and a bottle of water. We didn't say where we were going, but we both knew. The lake. The same one from childhood summers. The same one where we used to run barefoot on the dock, chase dragonflies, throw pebbles just to watch the ripples. It was dusk when we got there. The air soft and golden, the water still as glass. We walked a little off the trail, behind the tall reeds, where the dirt turned loose and mossy. I chose the spot. Emily dug. It wasn't deep, just enough to hold the box and the silence between us. When she finished, we stood above it. Neither of us moved. Then I said, "You can say something if you want." She shook her head. I said it all in the letters. I bent down, placed the box in the earth, and covered it slowly, handful by handful. Not rushed, not symbolic, just real. When we were done, she poured the water over the soil. A soft hiss rose as it soaked in. We sat there until the stars appeared, saying nothing. Eventually, she asked, "Do you think people can forgive themselves?" I thought about it. Only if they stop lying. She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Then I'm going to try. Later." She dropped me off at my apartment, before I stepped out of the car. She leaned over and hugged me, not stiff, not performative, just her arms around mine. A quiet thank you. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Inside, I sat on my bed and stared at the blank wall for a long time. Then I reached for my notebook and wrote, "Truth doesn't fix everything, but it changes what comes next." And maybe that's the first kind of healing. The charges came faster than anyone expected. 2 weeks after Emily and I buried the box, I got a call from Deputy Jensen. Her tone was calm, but clipped like she was holding back the weight of what she'd just witnessed. "We've taken your mother into custody," she said. She was cooperative. Mostly, no resistance. "She's being held for questioning on child endangerment and obstruction." I didn't ask where. I didn't ask how long. I just nodded, even though she couldn't see me. My stomach sank in that cold, detached way, like knowing a storm has already hit and all that's left is debris. I texted Emily the news. They arrested her. The typing dots blinked for nearly a full minute before she replied. "She'll say we betrayed her. She always will. That doesn't make it true." No. But it doesn't stop the ache either. Neither of us said anything more that night. The next morning, the local paper printed the story, "Retired Nurse Arrested in Infant Death Investigation." The article didn't include her photo, just a stock image of a courthouse and some cold wording, but the quotes were real. A family member raised concerns that led to the reopening of the case. Authorities found inconsistencies in the reported timeline of events. Further charges may follow pending forensic review. I read the article twice, then clipped it out and folded it into my journal. Not to celebrate it, just to remember that this happened. That it wasn't some ghost story I whispered into silence. My phone rang again later that day. This time, it was my father. "I suppose you've seen the paper," he said. No hello. No hesitation. "I have." His voice was lower than usual, like something in him had finally cracked, and now he was holding the pieces together with tape. "Your mother keeps asking for you. She's in jail." "I know. She still thinks I made it up. She says you twisted everything." I closed my eyes. "And what do you think?" He was quiet. "For a long time. Then I think the woman I married knows how to lie in ways even she forgets or lies." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. "She's going to blame Emily next," I said. "And then me. And then, probably you." "I'm ready for it," he replied. Finally. That word stuck in the air, finally. A lifetime of sidestepping, apologizing for her sharpness, her coldness, her dominance. And now, finally, he was ready. I didn't know if that made me feel better, but it felt different, and different was a start. A week passed before Emily asked me to go with her to visit Mom. She asked to see us. She said, "Together." I hesitated. "Why now?" She said she wants to explain herself. That phrase made my skin crawl. I pictured her sitting behind the glass, spinning truths into a silk web, waiting for us to step in. But Emily looked tired, more than tired, worn, like her spirit had been left in the dryer too long and now hung slightly misshapen. So I said yes. The detention center was clinical, colorless, and too cold. The kind of place where everything echoed, even whispers. We walked through 2 sets of metal doors before we reached the visitation room. Plastic chairs, plexiglass partition, a phone on each side. She was already there. Our mother, hair pulled back tightly, like she still needed control over something. No makeup, no pearls, just her eyes sharp, calculating, unchanged. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just picked up the phone. Emily sat. I followed. We lifted the receivers in sync. "Look at you two," she said through the glass. "United in betrayal. No pleasantries, no tears, just venom, polished and cold. You're here because of your own choices, I said. No one did this to you. I protected that child. She snapped. I loved him. You held him with bruised hands. Emily said quietly. You said you rocked him to sleep, but he never woke up. Our mother's mouth twitched. You're repeating state propaganda, she said. They're twisting my words. You lied to the coroner, I reminded her. You falsified paperwork. I protected our family. No, Emily said. You protected the version of our family you could control. You were more afraid of shame than you were of the truth. Her eyes flicked to me. And you, always the accuser. You were born looking for fault. I didn't flinch, and you were born refusing to admit it. We stared at each other. A pause stretched between the glass, a chasm so deep it could have swallowed our entire history. Then she whispered, I made one mistake. No, I said. You made silence into a system. You trained us to fear you. And when Micah died, you thought we'd be too broken to fight back. She slammed the receiver down on her side of the glass. Emily flinched. I didn't move. The guard came to escort her away. She didn't look back. When we stepped outside, the sun felt too bright. Emily shielded her eyes, but I kept mine wide open. She's never going to say sorry. She said, no. She's never going to admit what she did. No. Emily looked down at her hands. Then what was the point of any of it? I turned to her. So it doesn't happen again. So no one tells our silence for us. We sat in my car for a while after that. Neither of us wanted to drive away first, like leaving would be an admission that it was over. But it wasn't. It was never about winning. It was about ending the performance. A few days later, Emily invited me over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta. We sat on her couch, plates balanced on our knees, the baby swing still in the corner. She looked at it for a long time, then asked, Do you think I could be a mother again someday? I didn't answer right away. I took a bite of overcooked spaghetti. Then I said, Only if you let yourself become a different kind of one. She nodded slowly. I don't want to repeat her, she whispered. I want to feel everything, even the hard parts. I gave her a small smile. Then you're already different. Later that night, she sent me a photo. It was of Micah's framed onesie. She'd placed it on a small shelf, next to a candle and a folded letter. She captioned it, Not an altar, just a memory. And that was enough. It didn't fix us. It didn't resurrect him. But it meant the silence wasn't in charge anymore. And in families like ours, that's everything. The trial date was set for mid-September. It wouldn't be a high-profile case, no cameras, no dramatic news cycles. Just a quiet courtroom in a county that didn't want to believe bad things happened behind well-kept doors. But for us, it felt like a reckoning. A slow, aching countdown toward a version of justice that never really arrives. Just lands quietly, then dissolves. I was called as a witness. So was Emily. We weren't plaintiffs or prosecutors, just two women who had once been girls, once been daughters. Now somehow walking testimonies. The night before my appearance, I didn't sleep. I boiled tea. I reread my statement. I walked the living room floor until dawn crept under the curtains like a reluctant apology. I wasn't afraid of the courtroom. I was afraid of the echoes, of hearing my mother's voice twist again, of watching her try to retake the stage. Emily came with me. She sat beside me in the hallway outside the courtroom, her hand brushing against mine, not quite holding it, just letting me know it was there. We didn't speak. We just listened to the squeak of heels, the shuffle of lawyers, the occasional click of a water bottle lid. Marissa Nolan, a clerk, finally called. I stood, straightened my jacket, exhaled. The room was smaller than I expected. Pale wood, harsh lighting, and a judge who looked both tired and over it. My mother sat at the defense table, dressed in gray, her hair pinned back as if dignity could be reassembled through posture alone. She didn't look at me. They asked me simple things first. Name. Relation. My involvement in the report. Then came the questions that stuck. When did you first suspect abuse? When was the last time you saw Micah alive? What made you request the death certificate each time? I answered clearly, calmly. I didn't dramatize. I didn't editorialize. I stuck to facts, to the moments that wouldn't leave me. They showed the certificate, the bruises, my letter to the medical examiner, the priest's statement about the funeral scene, a nurse's affidavit, Emily's full written confession, and then they asked the question I hadn't prepared for. Do you believe your mother intended harm? The room felt too still. I looked at the judge, at the jury, at Emily, whose face was turned toward the floor, and then at her, my mother. Her eyes locked on mine, daring me. I don't know what she intended, I said, but I know what she did. The prosecutor nodded. That was enough. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I didn't return to my seat. I left the courtroom entirely. Emily followed 10 minutes later. We didn't say anything until we were in the parking lot. You were brave, she said. I was tired. She smiled faintly. Sometimes that's the same thing. The case ended without prison time. Probation, license revoked. Public record sealed except to direct family. No headline. No courtroom drama. Just a judgment read aloud. A gavel dropped like a cough. And a life quietly barred from practicing again. My mother didn't look at us during the ruling. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She simply stood, accepted the terms, and walked out of the courtroom alone. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment and stared at the framed photo of Micah. I wondered if justice had been done, if silence had finally been punished, or if all we'd managed to do was chip away at the mask she'd worn for decades. And then I realized it didn't matter, because Micah's story had been told. He hadn't disappeared into the silence. His name wasn't buried beneath family loyalty or maternal fear. He was seen, and in our family, that was a revolution. In the weeks that followed, Emily and I saw each other more often, not constantly, just enough to stay real. We met for coffee, swapped books, sat in parks on quiet afternoons where no one needed to explain anything. One Saturday, she brought over a small canvas. On it, she'd painted a soft, abstract swirl of yellow and gray, like smoke curling into dawn. It's not really a picture of him, she said, placing it on my wall. It's a picture of the space he left. I nodded, touched. It's beautiful. She glanced at me. Do you ever feel like you're still waiting for something? Like there's another shoe about to drop? I thought about that. All the time, I said. But lately, I don't flinch as hard. We stood in silence a moment longer. Then she hugged me. A real hug. Firm. Steady. You saved me, she whispered. No, I said. You saved yourself. I just didn't look away. After she left, I opened my journal and wrote a final entry under Micah's name. He was more than a baby who died. He was a truth no one wanted to face. And he mattered. In early October, the tree near his grave turned golden. I walked there alone one morning, holding a small glass jar filled with sunflower seeds. I sprinkled them quietly at the base of the marker. No prayer, no speech, just the seeds, and the wind. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned. It was Ivy, my cousin. She held a small teddy bear. I didn't come to the funeral, she said. I didn't know how. You're here now. She knelt beside me, placed the bear on the grass. You did what none of us could, she said. You broke the chain. I didn't speak, just let her words hang in the cool autumn air. Later, I walked home along the lakeshore path. The water shimmered. Leaves drifted gently across the surface. When I reached the dock, I sat at the edge and took off my shoes. Let my feet dangle in the cold, clear water. I thought of all the times I'd been told I was too sensitive, too loud, too much, too emotional. I smiled, because I finally understood something. They said it to keep me quiet, to keep me small, to keep me useful. But the truth, my sensitivity was the very thing that saved a child, and for the first time in my life I wasn't ashamed of it. I looked out across the water, the sky soft with the promise of dusk, and I whispered, "He mattered. I matter. And that's enough." Then I stood, walked home, left the silence behind me.